Louis, what's going on?
Doing good. How are you, Joe?
Doing great, doing great. This will be a I've never done a personal podcast on my personal YouTube channel, so
All right,
I'm excited to try this out with you.
great. Um, Happy to be the first one.
Exactly. So let's talk about you and what you're doing in the Bitcoin world. Can you tell us a little bit about, you, your background and Mises Capital?
Sure. Um, so I come from the investment management world. So when I graduated from college, I joined a family office fund in New York, and later on, I joined a cryptocurrency trading firm. Back in 2018, 2019. So I come from that kind of period of the cycle. Discovered Bitcoin during college, start buying it. Um, and later on during COVID, 2020, I started Mises Capital right after the COVID. I saw the
Yep.
crash. I think Bitcoin crashed to 5,000. And I, quit my job and, I told my family, why not we start buying this stuff? So I give it like a pitch to my family, especially my father. I tell him, this is like so we our family used to collect art, right?
Yep.
My pitch is pretty simple. Like Bitcoin is like art. It's scarce, desirable, piece of a collectible, and we should think about it more like you know a rare scarcity. And there's only 21 million. It's never going to be produced more. It's digital, right? It's liquid. It's more liquid than art, of course. But it's like you can see it, right? It's very abstract. Um, and because we understand scarcity creates value, right? Especially desirable scarcity creates tremendous value. So we immediately understand what Bitcoin represents and what drives the value behind it. So in 2020 May, this is where I started Mises Capital. So we start buying Bitcoin at like 5,000, 8,000 range, and later on we saw the Michael Saylor MicroStrategy enter into the space with corporation buying. So that was a unique era, unique cycle. I think that's when everything institutional adoption began, and now we can see that the full adoption actually began. So that's a quick wrap of my story. Um, and we also investing in some popular startup. Right now is popular, right? Like Onchain Capital, like Swan. We are very early on those equity play. Um, I'm very bullish on the Bitcoin ecosystem, um, but I'm more bullish on the asset itself.
Yeah, I love it. Obviously, I work at Unchained, so I'm also extremely bullish on Unchained, but also just like the Bitcoin ecosystem in general, like you're saying, but especially bullish on Bitcoin, the asset. I actually looked back, and the first time that you and I messaged each other was May 21st, 2020. So right after the COVID crash, as you were saying, I think Bitcoin was like $7,000, $9,000 range before Michael Saylor. So it's cool to look back and see the first message.
Yeah, and you have done a lot of research for us on the topics related to the price movement, the micro strategy, Bitcoin strategy. We've been pretty early on this initial wave.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, some of our research got published in Bitcoin Magazine. It was in Nasdaq.com. So it was kind of all
Yep.
over the place. But yeah, I feel like Mises always put out, great research. And then obviously was a great contributor to a lot of the early stage Bitcoin startups that you see today that now have, 100 something employees, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to look back, right? I think when we did the research, especially you writing those research, was pretty early. I think no other family offices have written such a research, right? We can see that in Bitcoin startup right? Like Onchain has Parker Lewis writing those phenomenal pieces. And we, as represented as as a wealth management, um, we also put up those pieces to kind of like signaling um, how the institution look at this and how the family office look at this asset class. Um, yeah, it's like 4 years ago, so we
Yeah.
were kind of pretty early on that wave, and right now it's kind of like seeing this the next wave, like the actual real wave, like that's coming in with the the Bitcoin ETF approved. I can tell that the sentiment is really different. And in I think in 4 years ago, that was like early stage, right? When we publish those research, I don't think there's much people reach out to us, right?
Yeah.
It's most likely it's like a Bitcoin community event. The Bitcoin community love this kind of research, and now I can really see that some of the my friends and family and those who are interested in Bitcoin start to dig it up, our previous research, and I always show them this is something we've done before. If you don't understand it, right, you don't understand some of the subject related to the price movement or the hash rate or how the mining process work and how Bitcoin represent a great wealth preservation, go check out our research.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of it still holds true today, which is pretty cool. I don't know if you remember, like, but the first time that we connected, I think we connected over something that I had, like a side project that I had built. It was called Satworth, and it
Yeah.
was tracking your portfolio denominated in Bitcoin. So we were a little too early to that, I guess. Now Michael Saylor though is trying to accumulate Bitcoin per share. He came up with that in the year 2024 today. What do you think about that? We went from building a portfolio tracker that was trying to dominate your net worth in Bitcoins, back in 2020. Now Michael Saylor is a CEO or chairman of a publicly traded company, and he's trying to stack more Bitcoin per share. How do you think about that?
I think right off the bat, I think when we discover MicroStrategy, when he came out, I think we both agree on his strategy could work out in the long term horizon, right? Even though there's a cycle, there's a bear market, right? He still come through. I think I think in the past, right? I did an interview with Bitcoin Magazine, especially talk about this, Bitcoin denominated return as a fund, right? It's super hard to create that kind of like um, strategy, and I think Michael has figured out something that pretty unique for his company, right? He can go out borrow money, at very cheap cost. That we saw that in 2021, right? He borrowed, I think, 1 billion at 0% interest, and he continued to borrow at that low interest rate. Issue like senior debt, right? He also issue convertible notes, also issue equity, right? So these are the when we speculative attack, right, to the financial system. He has the like a access to the printing press, right, in a traditional way. We all know like public company has this leverage where they can access to um, the financial market to borrow at relatively cheap cost, right? And not many people are using that to buy Bitcoin, or MicroStrategy is the only one that use that to buy Bitcoin. More conventionally, right? People access to the debt market or equity market, they used to buy back shares or do acquisition. There's a lot of company out there actually when they do acquisition or M&A, they issue stock, right? It's not like full cash on hand. They issue stock to raise capital or exchange stock of the acquired company, right? So I think MicroStrategy plays a little bit differently. He played the strategy on Bitcoin, right? So instead of acquiring the company, instead of merge into another company, they start decided to acquire Bitcoin or adopt the Bitcoin, right? Merge into the Bitcoin network. So So this is like a financial engineering play, and his main focus is what you talk about, right? Is the Bitcoin per share, on the how do I say? It's like for the it's like a new metrics, right? We used to think about earning per share. Now in the Bitcoin world, we kind of thinking about, how do we increase the Bitcoin per share relative to the equity value. So he really did something that really special, and I think it's first of the kind that he realized that he needs to increase the Bitcoin per share rather than earning per share. So he's going to start like a new corporate finance revolution, right? I think he talked about that in his interview, um, and um, and I don't see anybody follow that, right? At Mimesis, that we are just, we are very very flexible in terms of how we pivot. So instead of, looking for strategy that try to outperform Bitcoin, we buy into the MicroStrategy strategy, simply own the equity through our Bitcoin portfolio. I think that's the best way to earn yield on Bitcoin or outperforming Bitcoin. But there's like a volatility and downside to that, right? As Bitcoin crash, Bitcoin MicroStrategy could crash more. But I think if you look out in the horizon, right, you zoom out, you think that, the short term volatility doesn't really matter. What it matters is the long term um, return, right? The long term profitability, the long term Bitcoin per share increase in the MicroStrategy, and he has a unique ability to do that, right? Not many companies out there, public companies out there, could borrow against the equity, or borrow against the asset, or issue debt to buy Bitcoin. You know, over the past 4 years, we haven't saw anyone do that. Probably never. I don't know. Maybe this cycle we will have some company did that, but um, I was looking at, Jack Dorsey's company, right? Square, right? They are the very pro Bitcoin, or like um, Bitcoin denominated software company already, right? But if you look at their Bitcoin per share basis, it's like it's very very it's worse, right? It's they only buy, I think, 2 times in the past 4 years, and they never executed the balance sheet strategy after that, right? So if you look at Bitcoin per share of that company, is pretty terrible. But if you look at the MicroStrategy Bitcoin per share, it's increasing, right? And that's what you want in the portfolio. And we can debate on, whether you want to own a software business that actually provide cash flow, or you want to own a business that own lots of Bitcoin, and which, the Bitcoin that generated the cash is incredible big, right? It's almost like it's a net income, right? There's no maintenance, there's no cost around that, right? Actually, the cost is the very low interest rate. So it's very creative. Like Michael says, it's very creative to shareholder. So if you compare, those strategy or those company and business, you realize that maybe owning the asset itself, the underlying asset itself, is a much better play to drive, Bitcoin like performance. And that's what I think, and that's what I discovered for all the 4 years, right? You need some time to really to think about the MicroStrategy strategy, because what if there's a copier, right? But what we saw in the bear market is there's still copier, right? And they already acquired, you know 1% of the entire Bitcoin total supply, right? That's pretty impressive. And me personally, I have friends running public companies, right? Family owns public company. When it comes to decision of acquiring Bitcoin, or even pivot to that, you know, crazy strategy, quote unquote crazy strategy, they cannot do it, even though they are the majority holder of the company. So I kind of been through that discussion, right? It's not that easy to convince the board to say, let's just buy Bitcoin and not doing anything, right? I'm not saying that doing nothing, but it's like your whole entire focus is going to be acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. There are very few executives in the world, only very, very few, understand what's going on in the micro environment and what's going on with the fiat currency, what's going on with the banking system, and what's going on with the money that we have right now, right? And also there's a political conflict internally for the public company. It's like if you're not like a founding CEO or um, or own the majority of the share of the company, it's really really hard to convince the entire board and shareholder to to back that strategy, right? It's pretty unconventional, and you already need to be prepared for roasting, in a bear market. Uh, and I think Saylor went through like hell in the bear market when a lot of people criticized him taking the entire company, into that direction. But now I think he's pretty happy. I think he's feel pretty optimistic about where the direction is going. I think he's right. I think the whole strategy works out pretty well. Yeah, so I think for me and for my business capital, I think in terms of how we drive the Bitcoin return uh, in our portfolio, it's by owning the best strategy, right? I think MicroStrategy presented a great strategy that we think nobody's gonna replicate it. Even though they can, they are in a pretty good position.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, no human is perfect, no company is perfect, but I think
Yeah,
Saylor has done a pretty exceptional job. And I like his analogy or someone analogies that they've used in the past of Bitcoin is this like perfectly engineered bridge, and it just takes one very confident or person to go out and stand on the bridge and show the world that, hey, this bridge didn't fall. You guys can come on this bridge too. And I think that's what he's done. And maybe it will take longer for public companies to follow him, but it seems like more and more wealthy individuals and just normal people as well are going to be able to learn about Bitcoin and start putting a significant percentage of their wealth in Bitcoin.
yeah, and but I also think that being the first mover, right, in this space, he has sort of like a unmatched ability right now, because if you go to the capital market to raise fund, if even there's a second one that tried to copy it, um, there will be trust issue, right? Like for example, like Coinbase go out to the convertible note market to raise 1 billion. What do you expect Coinbase to do? Buy Bitcoin, right? It's not going to happen. So there's market perception around the strategy of that adopted by the company, right? Even though Coinbase can go out there to raise 1 billion, but the investor, the shareholder, will not believe that Coinbase will put 1 billion into Bitcoin. Probably put into a basket of other cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin, or expand the business, right? So it's not even the cryptocurrency industry is not buying into the MicroStrategy strategy, right? So the market has been cornered, in my opinion, from looking at MicroStrategy's um, actions, right? And and it's pretty sad to see that Coinbase being in the industry front runner, right, building one of the best exchange in the world, regulated, the biggest regulated exchange in the world, but still have um, I don't know how much Bitcoin they have, but I think it's way less than the MicroStrategy stack. That just a sign of not understanding what is the what's going on with Bitcoin, right? So I think there will be more people stepping on the bridge, but I think you will really have someone executive or a company that have that much conviction in an asset class. Um, yeah, and I don't think there will be the second one coming to take over. Um, and it really down to the trust, right? Like I think that right now the financial market has a trust in the um, in the MicroStrategy strategy, right? And they will just keep buying those convertibles and debts because the investor know they're going to go out and buy Bitcoin, right? Versus Coinbase, they probably have a hard time to do the fundraising, right? If it this is what I think in the next couple of years. I think MicroStrategy is going to continue to pile down on that strategy, and the capital market is going to be very welcome to that because they have seen in the bear market how the companies executed the strategy, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to hear what you think about this. I feel like recently, or maybe at least over the last 6 months or so, Michael Saylor has started to frame Bitcoin as like the apex form of property rather than a new form of currency. And I think part of the reason why he's doing it is to some extent it's like a Trojan horse where it's like, you know, if you have your block of New York City real estate, people aren't going to, say that that's competing with the US dollar. And so he's trying to frame it that way for Bitcoin too, where hey, like Bitcoin's actually not really competing with the US dollar, really wink wink for now. But it is a form of property or a form of store value that you can have. Do you like his framing of Bitcoin as apex property, or do you think it's confusing to people, or do you think it's the right way to go about it for now until Bitcoin gets big enough or much larger than it is today?
yeah. Well, I will agree with the framing. I think Bitcoin is the apex property. So when we consider the Bitcoin strategy, we start to sell some art, right? We start to borrow against our real estate to access to that cheap that market, right? So we start to see the rotation in asset, right? Eventually, I think people will adopt to the reality that Bitcoin is just a better asset to own, and if that's referring to the apex property, right? I think I think you need to compare, right? I think we did a research in back, right? Comparing Bitcoin to other asset class. Um, to be honest, I think Bitcoin stands out pretty far. Um, you know, I think technologically, Bitcoin's offers something that no other asset class can offer, right? For example, if you look at the closest one, I think could be the real estate, could be art, right? Those are, those asset class goes up in value because they are scarce and desirable, right? And Bitcoin has something that is very unique, which is the global liquidity, right? You can sell it anywhere you want. You can move that across border, right? You can store that in your brain or in a piece of hardware, or from on the third party custodian. You can store whatever you want, right? There's options to that, and there's also the option to you can sell it today, you can sell it next minute, next second, right? This option to liquidity, and it's also it's going to become easy to borrow, like what Onchain is doing for past many years, right? It's going to be also be the apex collateral asset, right? Yeah, I think Bitcoin
Yep.
is way superior than real estate than gold, um, than scarce art, um, even as S&P 500 or Magnificent Seven, or the hot AI stock like Nvidia, AMD, Supermicro. I think Bitcoin is greater because Bitcoin is like a digital asset. Is a protocol, right? There's no management risk. There's no counterparty risk. Um, it has no risk that your company has, right? And and it's fixed amount, right? And it has global liquidity. So in a sense that if you compare that to other assets, it's just way superior. And I have no question about it. And since I own this through all this year, we see the return on Bitcoin is way better than you own S&P 500, or you own real estate or own art, right? And sometimes people are just pretty much, you know, not going to look at this in a way that maybe they are a family that has been in real estate forever. Maybe they are a family that are been in our industry forever. So all they know is buying art. All they know is buying real estate, right? They think in their circle that maybe art is a superior asset. Real estate is a superior asset. So there's a little bit bias into that. They don't think through on the top down approach, right? Like observe, analytically, right? So for those people, they will try, they will have hard time to come across Bitcoin, but they have to, right? It's just like it's like you own some art, but you also need to own some financial asset, right? You're not going to be denominated everything in illiquid art. That's just irresponsible investing, right? And what Bitcoin can solve is that instead of owning those financial assets beyond the legacy asset that you own, right? Um, Maybe consider this as like a index fund, right? As a liquid option to your illiquid strategy, and that's what we do in the past 4 years is that we own a bunch of art, bunch of real estate illiquid. Real estate has some option to liquidity, right? You can borrow against it, right? Bank can take it, very cheap interest rate. But art, right? Very few art can be borrowed against, right? And when you sell it in the market, you have to wait like 3 months to get the cash, right? Who has the time for that? Once you experience that the whole process, you figured out, yeah, maybe I should just buy Bitcoin and hold on to it. Why should I hassle myself to buy art or real estate? Because those are taking forever, probably forever. And for me and you, right, we are pretty young, and we buy art just not for investment anymore. I don't think that's a trend in the future. We don't want to speculate on this illegal stuff, right? We don't want to trade this illegal stuff. So the mindset is going to be different, right? Because we most people don't discover um, a better store of value. So what I'm talking about, those family or those business legacy, has had legacy into those assets, and they will need to figure out, like, they have to rewire their brain, or at least in their family there will be a guy uh, that understand the basic of economy, or the basic of investing, to really pull them from that circle of biases and start owning Bitcoin, right? And and that's true for many traditional business. That's true for many family that owns the legacy asset, right? They will come to the conclusion that Bitcoin just better. You better figure out earlier than later, because as many those family diversify out of their legacy asset, I think their first choice is going to be Bitcoin, right? Are you going to buy more real estate because real estate is your thing? Are you going to buy more art, right? And specifically because they are in this legacy asset for some time, right? For ages, they know exactly what they represent, or exactly the risk that that those assets inherent, right? And there's no magical way to get rid of those inherent risk, right? For example, art become a digital art, right? For example, NFT, right? It doesn't take away the inherent asset risk that art has, even it goes digital, even it goes to, I know, physical sculpture, painting. It doesn't matter. What matters is just hard to sell, and also the taste is going to change, right? For example, like this cycle, might some NFT might popping, right? Next cycle, you can't even find a seller, or you can't even find a buyer, right? So that kind of risk is inherent in the asset class called art. Same thing with real estate. right? There's some inherent risk in the real estate. For example, right? What if there's a war coming, right? What if the government take away your real estate? Those are extreme example, but it happens all around the world, right? And I'm in Taiwan, right? I'm also very concerned about the likelihood of China take over Taiwan, right? What if that happened, right? And the real estate, the property that you own in Taiwan, it's not belong to you anymore, right? It's belong to other governments. So there's some risk, right? And it's not going to be a forever type of asset that you want to own, right? It's kind of like temporary asset that that makes you to it's kind of temporary store of value. In other words, I think Bitcoin is permanent store of value. To compare to all those assets that I just mentioned. Um, so do you want to invest in Bitcoin or other asset? I would say Bitcoin, right? And you probably wanted to start to think about, is your legacy asset worth to hold, right? You analyze or examine which asset you're gonna get rid of, right, and convert that into Bitcoin, because you cannot hold fiat, right? So you have to find something better as a store of wealth. Um, and I think Bitcoin represent that transition, right? And that's what we always talk about, right? Bitcoin's demonetize, you know, stock, real estate, art, and that demonetize come from families, traditional business start to rewire their brain, right? Selling their real estate, borrow against their real estate, selling their art, selling their stock, and embraced Bitcoin, right? Because we now have a permanent store of value. It pretty much can go on forever. Um, so I think that's where your question come in, right? It's like, is Bitcoin an apex money? Of course it is, right? At least for me, I'm starting to rethinking the asset allocation, right? And the problem in asset allocation is there's just too much money, right? You cannot dump it in the real estate. You cannot dump it in the art or stock market, and but you can convert your fiat into Bitcoin. You can change the money, right? You can embrace the better money, and I think that's a transition that we're going in right now. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I like the phrase that you mentioned, like permanent store of wealth or permanent savings. And I think a lot of people are probably underestimating the perfectly finite scarcity that is Bitcoin, right? Like when you have something like gold, humans that are holding gold are betting that other humans around the world are not going to figure out how to mine more gold. If you're holding Nvidia and the world is holding, $1 trillion or $2 trillion worth of wealth in the equity of Nvidia, they're effectively betting that someone won't figure out a way to make a better GPU, a cheaper GPU, a faster GPU at a slightly less price than Nvidia. It's a bet that that free markets won't be able to compete with Nvidia and take some of their market share. Same with real estate. Like if you hold a single family home, you're betting that there won't be 3D printing or AI that can somehow just spin up these single family homes, all across America, Taiwan, wherever, and devalue the wealth that people are storing in these single family homes or these apartment buildings. So it seems like I feel like as the world gets more advanced and the world progresses more, we're going to figure out how to make more of everything except Bitcoin. And that's just going to make the price of Bitcoin soar even higher, and the relative value of those other assets go lower relative to Bitcoin. What do you think about that?
yeah. I think there are some commodities or asset out there that has the same kind of like scarce desirable nature like Bitcoin. Um, but I think Bitcoin is more than that, right? Is if we look at Picasso, Monet, right? Those are, you cannot produce more because the artist has passed away, right? Um, but the hard part with those, scarce desirable good is authentication. How do you know it's a real Monet, is a real Picasso, right? You have to go through some history, right? And who has the authority to say they are real or they are fake, right? Bitcoin, you can authenticate through Bitcoin blockchain, authenticate through nodes. If the nodes reject it, it's not real Bitcoin, right? It's pretty easy and simple and no cost, right? To authenticate a Picasso and Monet has huge cost, right? You need to build a human resource around that. And also, those art as scarce desirable good as store value, they decayed over time, right? Can they still exist in 1,000 years from now, right? Probably, but the things with those physical thing, right? You cannot defeat the problem of the physical world. In other words, they're gonna decay, right? They're gonna disappear. So you have to maintain that. And what's the maintenance cost around those art, right? It's gonna be huge, right? You have to store that in a museum, in this, and you have to have, you know spend on the security, equipment to protect it, um, and that's why that all the expensive thing end up in the museum. If expensive art, because individual corporation have no ability to protect it for long term. Only the governments and museums are sponsored by governments, right? They could protect the art for long term, better than corporation, right? So there's also some the fact when it comes to those type of asset, right? Um, so if you think about Bitcoin, as a scarce desirable good, it's not just that, right? It also comes to the maintenance cost. It also comes to that it is digital, so you can move it around, right? It has more property than just scarcity. And then what makes Bitcoin unique is combining all this property together and makes it a single asset to hold. Because when you come across diversification, why you want to diversify? Because you want to own a little bit of everything, right? Why you want to own a little bit of everything? Because art has some properties that real estate doesn't have. Real estate has a property that equity doesn't have, right? And Bitcoin is kind of like combining all this good property together and form a new asset, right? And I think that's unique of Bitcoin. And do you have any other properties out there have all the properties of Bitcoin? Probably not, right? Bitcoin is the first one ever to combine all these good qualities into one asset, and people can hold it, right? It's not just conceptualize it, right? It's just people can really hold it, and there's a finite amount to hold. Um, so to get rid of those defect risk, also Bitcoin is combining all the good qualities into one single asset. Um, so I think that those are the why Bitcoin is better, right? It's not just 10x better than gold, 10x better than art. Um, it's like a whole new type of reality that people has to look at it and say, okay, this is just way better. And I think that we talk about the monetization is come from that, right? When you find out you have an asset that can solve you know every the portfolio allocation problem, and you don't have to diversify because you want to own every type of different properties, right? And Bitcoin just one properties that inherits all the goods and get rid of all the conventional risk. So I think that's what comes down, why Bitcoin. It's not just scarce, right? It's also has a liquidity, has any other good properties that other properties has. Combine it into one single asset, one network. So that's what I think we call it, right? It's like the backbone of economy. right? This is the whole economy is going to build on this monetary protocol, right? It's a monetary protocol, so it has to be better. It has to be better than all those assets combined.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like a hot topic that has been discussed in the community recently has been all of the various Bitcoin models, the price models, right? We had stock to flow, which I believe came out in either late 2018 or early 2019. And there's been some debate about that over the last, 4 or 5 years. Now, more recently, the power law model is becoming popular too. What do you think about all of these Bitcoin models? Do you like the models? Do you hate the models? Is there any reason to look at them? Is there a good reason to look at them? How do you think about the models?
Yeah, I think we have looked at the stock to flow model before, right, Joe? I think in our research, I think we mentioned that, and it's like a model that you wanted to add it to your research paper, but is it accurate? Do the price really actually follow the model? So for stock to flow case, right? It just from the past cycle, we already noticed it's not accurate, right? Um, is there any model that's accurate? I don't know, right? I look at power law, right? I think there's some excitement around it. I think every other cycle you will have this kind of new model coming up and try to predict the price action, right? Maybe long term they are true, because we all know Bitcoin is probably go up, forever. So those power law, those start to flow, could be make sense in the long term, but short term, you know, you don't need the model to predict the long term, right? Because you understand just the basic of the properties, so you know how the asset is going to go in the next decade, 20 years, or 100 years later. So the model only works or only worth to look at if it's predict the short medium term, right? Do traders want to trade on the next 6 months or next 3 months, right? And I think those model, probably be an indicator, but no model can tell you that exactly where the price is going. So I'm not in the, I don't have the expertise to really tell the is the model accurate or is the model good or bad. I think people have been coming up those models have done a lot of work, right? Me personally, I don't have the expertise, I don't have the skill set to understand the rationale behind or the logic behind those power law or stock to flow model. I think it's good that in terms of like traders, investor, to look at it to see, what was like the mathematical way of looking at the Bitcoin price model, right? Um, I believe like in some research, like for example, like it's Goldman Sachs research or JP Morgan research is going to cite those model. It's just a way for people or their client to check it out and see, oh, Bitcoin is going up like this. Isn't that great? Right? We're going 10x from here, maybe in the next 5 years. Isn't that great? Right? And I think that's the purpose of the model is to help people to kind of see where the Bitcoin price is going. Um, and and I don't think those model has any predictability, right? Maybe you should trust yourself and make some allocation instead of looking at those model. Um, I think the past cycle that many people have mistaken is that they try to trade around with the stock to flow model, and I think that's a terrible mistake because stock to flow model will not predict the FTX collapse, right? Celsius collapse or Genesis collapse. And those are like external issue outside of the model, right? Those are the events that actually drive the price. So it's really hard to predict all that kind of stuff. There's too many components. Um, in the world right now, right? And especially Bitcoin as a global asset. Who knows if there's a sovereign wealth fund, try to buy Bitcoin tomorrow, right? And they throw like a couple billions in. Who knows? Who knows? Like maybe Apple start to think about they should buy Bitcoin on the treasury. So those are the external factor that nobody can predict. And but I believe Bitcoin is going up, right? But in the short term, it might fluctuate. It might go up a lot. Can those models predict that? I don't think so. I think it's beyond all this model. And I think it's better to look at Bitcoin in a way that understanding, its unique property, right? Not understanding by where the price is going, because I believe in NGU right now, but go up. I think that's a better mental framework to equip. I think those people who publish model have intention of trading Bitcoin, right? And it's good for them because that's what they want. They're going to create more models around this asset and predict where to sell, where to buy. And that I think that's not a good strategy when it comes to Bitcoin. I think the good strategy is just to acquire it and figure out a cheap um, cheap way to borrow money, borrow fiat, and buy more Bitcoin. Um, Other than that, trading on that, buy sell it. I think few people can win in the long run. So that's my take. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember back in 2020, 2020 and 2021, I feel like a lot of people were trying to time that cycle, and especially with the stock to flow model, thinking that Bitcoin would go above 100,000, and it never did for whatever, many reasons. And people missed out. And like, it just goes to your point of like, trying to time Bitcoin, trying to time markets in general is probably a fool's game. It's more of like, you need to look at the fundamentals of the asset that you're buying, and for us, it's Bitcoin, and then you need to identify why it's special, and it's because of its unique, superior monetary properties, and like timing that, and trying to identify when humans are trying to get in it and try to get out of it, and trying to time it, and within a month, a couple months time period is not really possible. And like, if you think you found something that enables you to do that, you're probably just like wrong.
I will not say fraud. I think there are all kinds of participants in the world, right? And people will just figure out some model. And if you buy into it, that that's your fault, right? You don't follow the right um, mental model. You follow the wrong mental model. And I want to maybe touch on that a little bit. It's like when you look at Warren Buffett, how he values stock, right? There's model, right? Well, traditionally, how we deal with company valuation, we use DC what's it called? Discount cash model,
DCF,
right?
yeah.
Um, and that's only for reference. So model is for reference. And at the end of the day, you have to understand the company you own. Besides just looking at the number, number is important. Modeling out the number is also important. But you have to understand the real basic, right? It's like what does a company do? Like for example, Apple is a monopoly business, right? You own a monopoly business at a fair price. That's all you want to know. And after you bought at the fair price, I just say the fair price is, I don't know, $100, maybe $50. Who knows, right? But if you believe you bought at a fair price and you think the company is going to be more valuable in the future, how valuable you don't know, because maybe there's a surprise, right? Maybe the company can continue to grow. So you never want to sell your winner, right? After you bought at a fair price, as a into a monopoly business, you just write it, right? Even though it kind of like exceed your model, like you predict the valuation is going to 5x, but it did a 10x, right? And but you sell at 5x because you think it has touched your the upper limit of your model. right? And do you just sell it? No, right? That would be the mistake, right? And so coming down to an investment psychology is if you bought something at a fair price, that means and it's a good company, it's a good monopoly business, and the business stay stronger than ever. You don't want to sell it because you never know how high it can go, or what's the real valuation of the company, right? Nobody believe Microsoft can be a 3 trillion company. Like if you told me 10 years ago Microsoft can be a 3 trillion company, I don't know, right? Nobody predict that, right? If Bill Gates know, right? Bill Gates is started Microsoft, and the thing is that he can hold on to the Microsoft, become the richest person ever, but he didn't, right? Even the founder can predict where the whether or not Microsoft can be a 3 trillion company. So that's a pretty interesting, observation, right? So when it comes to Bitcoin, like if you bought at a pretty good price, let's say you bought in 2009, 2010, very early on, right? And you understand this thing can grow on and on. You never want to sell it, right? And you never say that, oh, you touched the upper bound of the start to full model, so I need to sell it. No, right? Because it go up more. So that's the lessons is that you have to you have to understand the thing you own, and you have to trick yourself that you bought at a fair price, because who knows what a fair price is. Everybody can have a different assumption, different model, but the thing is you bought into it, right? If it's a good business, you bought into it. And what Warren Buffett had this very famous realization is that I think Charlie Munger told him is you want to buy a good business at a good price, right? You don't want to buy a bad business at a cheap price. What does that mean? Is bad business is bad business no matter what price you pay for it. If you pay for a nickel, it can still go to zero, right? But if you bought a good business at a good price, even though there's some premium, but the good business is good business, it's going to worth more in the 5 years, 10 years, and you were still thinking back and say, "Oh, I bought at a fair price." And I think that applies to Bitcoin as well. Like people bought as $1, people bought $10, and now they paying 70K on the Bitcoin. What do you tell me what's a fair price? And can anybody model that? Right? I don't think so. So the lesson is, I think, just own the best asset, right? If you understand the asset itself, you let your winner ride. Like if your cost base is $1,000, why you want to sell it? You have no rush to sell it, right? But if your cost base is higher and now the price is dropping, you probably have some anxiety, right? And that anxiety comes from you're not knowing what you're owning, right? And I think there's some it's just basic investing framework mentality that I think um, many should adopt, but very few can actually do it. But just something that let you know. And I'm not a model guy, right? I don't know what the fair price Bitcoin is, but I know when it dropped 70% from the high, you just bought it, right? If you have cash, continue to buy it, right? I think that's a right mentality, right framework, going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it is the most superior form of money because of its unique monetary properties. And if you haven't done the work or the research into diving what Bitcoin is and why you own it, then the 70% drawdown is going to shake you out. And you
Yeah.
might be part of the reason why it goes to 71% or 75%. And then the key thing that I think is very true about Bitcoin is when it's fallen 75% or 80%, who's buying it at that point? It's the people that actually have conviction and actually have a strong balance sheet, actually are, have a solid stream of cash flows. They're not over leveraged. Those are the people that are buying Bitcoin when it's down 75, 80%. And those are some very strong hands. Those are some of the strongest companies. Those are some of the strongest individuals from a finance perspective, and they're not going to be selling anytime soon. And those are the ones that are going to benefit when, inevitably the market turns around, because Bitcoin is the best form of apex property, best form of money, and they're going to be the ones that benefit. And if you don't understand it, then you're going to get shaken out, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think model cannot save you that, right? It's pure psychology. It's a mental model that, you should be equipped with. I think model just, disrupt your mental model a little bit, because you always have that price target in your mind. But, don't set a price target on the best asset ever.
Yeah, truth. It's going up forever. In the long run. Last question. It's late here in the US, so then we can wrap it up. But I do want to ask you kind of about this. The idea of hyperbitcoinization, what is that to you? When is it gonna be here? And how do you see the world changing, potentially decades into the future?
Yeah, I think we both are, young guys. I think we're gonna see the hyper-Bitcoinization happens in our lifetime. Um, yeah, I think it comes to phases. I think right now with the ETFs, right? I think the store value thesis is gonna dominate the whole thing, right? Um, and I think the hyper-Bitcoinization actually happened when a lot of us, a lot of 8 billion people around the world actually have access to Bitcoin, or actually are thinking about owning Bitcoin. And that sounds very difficult, right? 8 billion people. Not everyone is going to have Bitcoin, right? But I think at the end of the day, when we look at 20 years, 30 years out, I think this asset has the ability to penetrate into everybody's portfolio, right? Because it's very easy to own. You can just click on the app and buy it, right? So it's much easier than buying into S&P 500, buying into real estate, buying into art, buying into any asset. I think this is the most easy asset to buy in the entirety of the asset class. So I think it's gonna be like a smartphone adoption, right? Pretty much everybody has a smartphone right now, right? And that penetration is gonna be very drastic as we move um, into this, the new phase, which I call the acceleration of the store value, right? I think people are starting to see Bitcoin as, that we talk about the apex property, right? Um, and this acceleration of store value, meaning that the price is going to go up drastically. So I think the price need to go up in able to have mass adoption, right? The mass adoption doesn't come from we building like a better layer two or a better or better utility around Bitcoin. I think the mass adoption comes from the price goes up massively, and people are paying attention to this asset and want to own it. And after they own it, right, maybe like 50%, 60%, or majority of the population owns Bitcoin, and then we move on to the utility part. Like people can start to trade it, exchange it, use it as a form of collateral, or use it as a form of currency, um, and that we enter into the circular, a much larger circular economy. Because right now people are keep converting fiat to Bitcoin, and all they have is Bitcoin. What are they gonna do, right? They need to buy goods with Bitcoin, right? And at that point, we can start to see the utility emerge. How long does it take? I don't know. Maybe 20 years, 30 years. I think we're still in the very early stage of price discovery. And that price discovery also mean that, people are discovering Bitcoin. People are adopting it. So as price goes on, it goes up and up and up, more and more population are going to adopt it, right? Because this is money, right? If we look at the money, if we look at the asset, the way that Nvidia got adopted, or the way that Apple got adopted, is through you know stock price rising higher and higher, market cap go higher and higher, right? And then they become a monopoly, or and people start using it more and more. So Bitcoin is the same, especially for money, especially for financial assets, especially for digital asset. If I think that's the same trajectory, right? Price is a first and foremost the most important indicator of the hyperbitcoinization, right? So I mean fiat price, right? So how high could it go? A million? Does a million means hyperbitcoinization? So I think people have different benchmark. People might think 10 million we can reach hyperbitcoinization, right? And the real interesting thing is once Bitcoin passed the gold market cap, I think we are entering into another new phase of price discovery. So after we really figure out what Bitcoin worth in the fiat term, we probably will see a real happening of Bitcoinization, or in other words, that fiat become worthless, right? In terms of Bitcoin, how worthless can it get? 10 million per Bitcoin, $1 equal 1 cents. For me personally, I'm already in the hyper Bitcoinization, right? And I think for you as well, we already live in the Bitcoin standard, right? But how many people out there will join us? I think in the next decade there are many people who join us, because the value they hold, the Bitcoin they hold, goes up value drastically. They become the new wealthy class. They become the new buyer, the new backbone of economy, right? And those people are going to build business, build architecture, create arts, you know, and build crazy technology, right? And I think that's where we are heading, and and I think my kind of like view or my benchmark is $1 equal 1 cents, and then we reach to hyper Bitcoinization. And how much is that per Bitcoin? A lot, right? And that's what I'm wishing for, right? Maybe it happens in my lifetime. Maybe it happens in 50 years. But we have the luxury to wait. And there are boomers out there, right? There are like several, people own Bitcoin like Boomer. They had to figure out how they pass down that Bitcoin, or they just don't think they're gonna survive in the next 30 years or 20 years. So they're gonna sell it, right? And for us, the young guys, I think if you own Bitcoin early on, and you have the opportunity to see what's the other side of the hyper Bitcoinization, I think the best for you is to hold on to it and wait like maybe 20 years, 30 years, and you see what's going to happen. And hyper Bitcoinization doesn't really comes, you know, just magically happen, right? We need to build things around Bitcoin, especially we talk about the Bitcoin ecosystem. We need business, we need bridges, right, to cross on the other side. So that will be important. And I think not many business going to build a Bitcoin business, but majority of business will access to Bitcoin in form of treasury, in form of capital they hold. So I think that path of adoption, is critical, right? Not just building a services. It's also about converting your money into better money, right? And that, I think that process is gradually and suddenly, right? Like famous Parker Lewis say, right? I like his work. So I think in terms of where we're heading in the next decade, it could be really interesting. We are entering into a new price discovery mode. And by phases, we are approaching to what we call hyper Bitcoinization, and it also comes to like nations adoption as well, right? Or like company adoption, public company adoption, still early. But the majority of the adoption in the next decade or two is going to view Bitcoin as a store of value, not a medium of exchange. It's pretty and I it's not easy to take that, right? Because people think, many people think like Bitcoin is a good medium of exchange. But the majority of the people and majority of people who hold it will not view Bitcoin as a good medium of exchange right now. They will view Bitcoin as apex property, right? We need to pass that phase, right? And how exactly we can pass that phase is the Bitcoin price reach high enough, and people no longer live on the fiat standard, right? They convert all the fiat into Bitcoin, so we can start the medium of exchange world. Where I believe is come after hyperbitcoinization. When price go to the roof, everybody adopts Bitcoin, and we can start thinking about how we can exchange goods with Bitcoin.
Yeah. One final thought for me, and then we can start to close it out. I definitely agree. I mean, I think you brought up the idea of gold parity, which would be about $500,000 to $700,000 per Bitcoin. I think that is like the early stages still of this idea of Bitcoin adoption and ultimately hyper Bitcoinization. I think it's, when I think about Bitcoin, it's like maybe there's about 1% of the world that has any exposure to Bitcoin. And I think even of that 1%, I think less than 1% of that 1% probably is personally on a Bitcoin standard where they're like, hey, Bitcoin is a large portion of my portfolio, and my objective is to accumulate more Bitcoin and to denominate things in Bitcoin and to earn more Bitcoin. And all at the same time, when global adoption is basically 0.01%, we already have 94% of all Bitcoin that have been mined. And it's like the 99.99% is about to come after the 6% of Bitcoin that's still out there to get your hands on. And that's just going to probably melt some people's brains.
Yeah. I think the next decade is going to be the equivalent of gold rush, right? I think people is going to acquire as much as Bitcoin as possible, and you don't want to be cute to say, I can spend my Bitcoin this way and that way, right? You want to hold on to it because the price is going to reach to gold parity, and the price is going to pass the gold parity because we are in the price discovery. We are not in the phase that you should sell your Bitcoin, you should pay your Bitcoin, buy goods. Probably the best option is to borrow against it using Onchain, right? Or other source of financial services that allows you not to sell your Bitcoin, because that will be very important in the next decade. You don't want to sell something that go up 10x, like that. Just some people being technical, some people being illusional about the reality of what's happening, right? And you can spend more after, right? You can spend more after we reach the hyper-Bitcoinization. Or you're already on the Bitcoin standard, right? You're already on the hyper-Bitcoinization reality. You have converted all your fiat into Bitcoin. But still, try hard not to sell it. If you can borrow against it, right? If you don't have those kind of option, there will be option in the future. I believe so, right? There will be option in the future that you don't have to sell your Bitcoin, right? And I think people are building that kind of services around the world. So be patient, right? Be patient and stay humble, right? Stack sats. And really, what it comes down in the next decade or two is that limit your ability to sell Bitcoin, right? Increase your ability to buy more Bitcoin. I think that's the good strategy, right? It's not a good strategy to encourage people to sell it, right? Or encourage people to buy stuff with Bitcoin, right? I think that's like, you're telling those people to be poor in next decade. You don't want to do that. You want them to hold on as much Bitcoin as possible, right? And yeah, so fundamentally, right now we are accelerating in this price discovery phase, and I think I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think this new era, the gold rush era, is going to be phenomenal. And we really, like you say, we have very minimal supply left to mine, right? And when we are going to experience the next decade, like maybe one or two halving, right? Two halvings, right? 4 years, one. So 8 years, two halving. And, you know, beyond that, how much supply is going to be mined? Maybe less than 1%. So that's just, predictable, right? And you have to think out in 8 years, 10 years. If you don't think out in 10 years, you look back at yourself, it's like, why not I buy more here? Right? Because the thing's going to get more scarce over time. And people already know it's 21 million, right? They just need to happening to remind themselves, oh, Bitcoin is getting way less, right? And each cycle there will be people that get the reminder, get the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin's gonna knock on your door and say, I'm becoming more scarce, right? Do you want to buy me at 70K, or do you want to buy me at 1 million? That's your choice, right? I think it's the next decade is going to be important, and it's going to pave the way of the future Bitcoin utility, and that's going to happen as well. But it's not top priority in this phases. I think the top priority in this phase is on as much Bitcoin as possible.
Completely agree. Louis, this has been great catching up, talking Bitcoin, talking
Yeah.
Mimesis. Do you have any final thoughts where you want to send the audience to your personal stuff, your business?
Well, yeah. Follow my work through my X Twitter account, Louis H Liu. And if you wanted to look at our previous research at Mimesis Capital, go on to mimesiscapital.com. There you can find a lot of research done by Joe in 3 years ago, 4 years ago, which is our pretty good research. Can get your mentality straight. Yeah,
I like it. Well, Louis, thanks again. This was awesome. Great to catch up.
likewise.